our longest trusted English newspaper since 1898. Now available digitally. Computer, order the Manila Times Digital Edition. Subscribed. Get the Manila Times Digital Edition for less than 2 pesos and 50 centavos per day when you sign up for 1 year. The Manila Times, news source of choice, trusted since 1898.
Greetings! Thank you for lending an ear to the Voice of the Times for Sunday, May 22, 2022. For today's editorial, independent media not necessarily anti-Marcos. The government of President-elect Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. is poised to start its term not only with a clear mandate, but also with likely control of Congress. With that, the role of an independent media, the so-called Fourth Estate, becomes more critical in maintaining our democracy. But to be independent does not mean simply being anti-Marcos. It also entails being independent of political camps opposing the incoming president. At the House of Representatives, Marcos's first cousin, Martin Romualdez, will likely be the next speaker. And at the Senate, a coalition of their allies, including the new president's sister, Senator Amy Marcos, is taking shape as the supermajority. On one hand, such political alignment has benefits. One could argue that the government and lawmakers can collaborate on policies and programs needed to realize national objectives. Admittedly, democracy moves slowly and frustrates people desperate for reforms. But without lawmakers pushing back against the executive branch, the check and balance function of Congress would be weaker. The majority, for instance, could railroad bills through the system, regardless of their impact on the minority. The majority might overlook or purposely ignore the interests of the minority. Fortunately, the Philippines still has an active media sector that has a rich history of standing up to the government, even during the term of the late Ferdinand Marcos Sr., the father and namesake of the incoming president. Even in this new age where social media has emerged as a substitute source of opinion and other information, conventional media has crowded out influencers and news websites in the digital space. Regrettably though, some media outfits and personalities have been undermining their colleagues and competitors for being friendly with or soft on Mr. Marcos. The problem is that those self-proclaimed independent media obviously favored Vice President Maria Leonor Leni Robredo during the campaign. While the independents were diligently fact-checking pro-Marcos reports, they were largely silent on the false claims and statements coming from Ms. Robredo's camp. In portraying themselves as more trustworthy, they claim to be the only ones asking Mr. Marcos tough questions about his tax cases, his family's unexplained wealth, and human rights violations committed during martial law. First, those questions have been asked in countless interviews and by many journalists for more than 3 decades, even during the last campaign. The answers given simply failed to satisfy some people. To ask about them repeatedly without any new development or angle actually seems biased rather than brave. Such acts expose a political agenda, not demonstrate independence. Second, no media organization should dictate the questions that journalists from other outfits should ask. To deride those who deviate from the repetitive questions is self-serving, perhaps even harmful to journalism's integrity. Meanwhile, the independents were portraying Ms. Robredo as someone who could do no wrong. They hardly challenged her negative messaging, particularly the mudslinging against Mr. Marcos, or scrutinized her platforms, which seemed flawed. The programs of Mr. Marcos are not perfect either, which is why this newspaper, and probably others, chose to ask about those instead. But some dismissed them as not the hard or legitimate questions that qualify journalists or media organizations as independent. To actually be independent means not favoring any political camp, whether they be that of Mr. Marcos or others that oppose him. Criticizing the powers that be is only part of what it means to be truly independent. It also includes fairness, like giving praise when it is deserved and being constructive in critiques. Because media traditionally plays an adversarial role, some assume they should be aligned with those opposing the government of the day. This is not always the case, especially when the opposition merely undermines every government action, sacrificing the public interests to satisfy some political aim. Given the emerging alliance between the executive and legislative branches of government, media should revisit its role as a watchdog of public interests. But it should not act on behalf of government critics or fall in line with journalists favoring a political camp. In a democracy, media owes its loyalty only to the truth. And that's the editorial for Sunday, May 22, 2022. For more news and information, get a copy of the Manila Times on print, subscribe to its digital edition, or log on to www.manilatimes.net. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, and listen to the Voice of the Times.